Good evening, everybody, and welcome to episode 7 of Meet the Judge. And firstly, before we start anywhere, as a true American Cocker person, happy 4th of July to all our American friends. Hope you're having a safe and enjoyable 4th of July. We got the flag behind us. Tonight I'm joined by none other than Mr. Paul Lawless, who, along with Jean and his daughter Kelly, show probably our best known Belgian Shepherd dog exhibitors worldwide. Have shown with much success. Paul is an all breeds FCI judge, and hello, Paul. You're very welcome, Pablo.
Cheers. Thank you, Colin.
How are things?
I hope you like my signature tonight.
Absolutely, Pablo. How are things?
Things are fantastic. Yeah.
Enjoying the break?
The playground of the rich and famous.
Absolutely. What, County Kildare? The Irish Riviera.
Yeah.
So let's kickstart here, Paul, with your first breed and what drew you to the sport.
My first breed, bizarrely, is Cocker Spaniels, English Cocker Spaniels.
Really?
Yeah. And I was dragged into the sport because my family had Cockers. So my older brother, Mick, who was, many will know him from Bouvier nowadays, and Mick used to show Cocker Spaniels, and I was the sprog of the family coming along, so I was the bucket boy and brought along to the shows, and I eventually ended up with a Cocker Spaniel of my own as well. So bizarrely, actually, we lived right across from the Irish Kennel Club offices.
Okay.
In Harold's Cross, we lived in Levere Terrace, literally 1 minute's walk from the IKC offices as we know it now. And over the wall from where we lived was Harriet Boyle, and Harriet Boyle was a very famous Cocker Spaniel breeder in those days. Stony Kirk was her affix. So there was a lot of really good characters in those days in Cockers, and shows were never boring, especially around the Cocker Ring. We had Tom and Kay Kramer, Bill McEntee, Florence Matrustri, you know. So a lot of, and one very famous lady actually was a lady called Claire O'Callaghan.
I remember her, yes.
I don't know how she'd get on today, how she'd survive today, because Claire used to show, I remember, when I remember her, she used to show a big black and white Cocker male called Crosby and Cool Customer. And you'd see her, you'd go to the ring just to watch the class she was in, because if she didn't get first, she would just take the prize card and rip it up. And she'd throw it. And then I think she got warned off, and then she would wait until she got out of the ring, and then she would throw it in the bin. But I mean, there were great characters in those days, and so that was the initial introduction.
And what drew you to Belgian Shepherds then?
Well, actually, after Cockers, we had Rottweilers.
Okay.
And had a couple of Rottweilers from Olive Hanna, who lived in Dundrum off Taney Road. And I had
a very good friend of Michael Coles.
Absolutely, yeah. And Michael Leonard, I think. And had Rottweilers. I have to say, I still am. I was a really bad handler in those days. Okay, I was a shockingly bad handler. And now, my big hobby was football. So really, if I had been any good at football at all, I would still be playing football. I never have got into dogs. But I was as bad at football as I was a handler, you know. So we got Rottweilers. We were a little bit unfortunate health-wise with Rottweilers. And I was looking for something a little bit different, and then I came across Belgian Shepherd, Tavern's originally. And my first one in 1985 was a bitch called Fox Pitt's Northern Dancer. And she actually probably improved me as a handler. because she was, looking back now, she wasn't a fantastic Belgian Shepherd, but she was very flashy. She was long in the back. She came from American Lions. She was a little bit longer in the back. So on the move, she wasn't typical Belgian Shepherd. She
Okay.
floated around the ring.
Yeah.
And so that helped to make me look a little bit better. So I kind of got a bit cocky and decided, yeah, this is the breed for me.
So I think you probably answered my next question, that if you didn't show dogs, what sport would you have gone into?
Yeah, football without a doubt. Yeah.
Without.
But unfortunately, as I've already told you, I was so bad at football. I mean,
Well, it wasn't an injury then that stopped you playing. No, it was just bad football.
I would like to say I had serious knee damage, but that was probably more related to the weight I carried. The highlight of my career was winning the Dublin and District Schoolboy Leagues under 12K in 1976. And the team I played for was called Spartak Dynamo, which sounds very romantic, but they were actually not from Russia. They were from Rathfarnham.
Okay.
They wore West Ham colours, so that was their saving grace, you know.
And that was the glorious summer of '76.
The glorious summer of '76, yeah. Which was an ideal time to be a substitute.
So, in your showing career, then, what's your highlight?
Showing, we've been very fortunate with the Belgian Shepherds. Most people know now we're primarily Groenendaels, and I would say that we've had some of our club show wins have really been highlights. When you're competing, and when I say club shows, I mean club shows throughout Europe.
Yes.
And when you're competing with the very top level, and you're competing under a judge who is a top breed specialist, who themselves is a breeder, who you may look up to, I always found that club shows and winning club shows was a big deal for me. But we would have had two really, really big wins, which I suppose have to take precedent. But one would be we won Best in Show All Breeds in the UK in 2016 at Payton with Figo. So that was a spectacular win. It was the first time ever a Belgian Shepherd had won Best in Show All Breeds in the UK. And I think maybe slightly topped by Crufts in 2011. At Crufts in 2011, we won the Dog CC, the Bitch CC, and Best Puppy and Breed with 3 homebred dogs. Under one of the top breed specialists of all time in the UK, the late James Clifford. So I would say that probably topped the whole lot, you know.
Okay. And then you mentioned there that you're now predominantly Groenendaels. And I, as you say, you've had Taverns, and I think you've had a few Malinois as well.
Yeah.
Why specifically Groenendaels, and are Taverns Taverns falling off now?
No, it's hard to know. I think probably both myself and Jean just favour the Groenendael. But like, I mean, we have a Malinois here, or we have a Tavuren that lives with Kelly, and I wouldn't rule out in the future that we would have Tavurens, but we've just kind of concentrated more on the Groenendaels. We've had probably more joy over the years with Groenendaels. You know?
Okay. And when was your first championship judging appointment, and what was the breed?
First championship judging appointment was Combine Canine Club in 1989, and the breed was Rottweilers, and that was in Leopardstown Racecourse.
Awesome.
I think they were up there for 1 year. But Combine Canine Club always say that I was the best judge they've ever had.
Really?
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Yeah.
It's funny, they used to say that to me as well. And when did you achieve all breed status?
Last year, after judging at Irish Ladies Kennel Association, I got all breeds. So
it takes quite a while here right now, doesn't it?
Sorry?
It takes time here nowadays.
It does, yeah, and I think it's good.
I think a lot of people think that we make all rounders up quite easily, but it's actually we don't. It takes a long. It's a long process.
Yeah. Plus, the other thing about it is, it's all right saying, you know, if you get disappointment, and if you get disappointment, and if you get disappointment, you can go through a group. you have to be invited. Someone has
Yeah,
to invite you. You know, it's not like where you can sit down and say, I can do so many exams this year and I'm passed for these breeds. In
absolutely.
Ireland, we have to. And now, thankfully, the Education Committee, we have a program there for education, which I think is will be beneficial to us going forward.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And how many countries have you judged in?
I have judged approximately 33. So
33.
yeah, so there's 160 countries that have not yet invited me, and I'd just like to tell them to give me a call. Okay,
Yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll just wait for that. And do you have a favorite country?
to judge in.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, it's a difficult question, I know, because as we've discussed so many times with other judges, you don't get to see a lot of the countries
no,
themselves.
no, again, judging around the world, it sounds very glamorous, and in fairness, there's some fantastic trips, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times it's airport, hotel, showgrounds, hotel, airport. Um, there's many shows that will make a special effort for you to try and show you a little bit of their country, which is really nice if you have the opportunity. Um, and it's hard to say what your favorite country to judge in because sometimes shows can stand out in your memory because the company, the friends you made on the panel, maybe the breeds that you judged on the day that they were particularly good breeds and strong quality, or a particular dog that you judged on the day.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of things that can make a judging appointment very special. I would have to say that Scandinavia for me, I was very fortunate to judge a lot for Jarmo Hilpinen in Finland, and
Yes.
he ran spectacular shows and always, made a great effort. Not just alone for the judges, but as an organizer for the exhibitors as well. So they were always special shows to be part of. And I think that the Scandinavian exhibitors are very knowledgeable,
Yes.
and they don't get upset if you give them a very good. They appreciate. They're knowledgeable about what they're showing. Um, they appreciate your opinion, and I think that's very enjoyable. There's one actually. I like judging in Denmark as well because normally at the start of the shows in Denmark, they have one lady who'll sing a song on the first
Okay.
morning of the shows, and that generally puts it puts a song into my head for the day that I'm humming along as I judge that. But it normally puts people into a relaxed and good humor, and so that's
Okay. And aside from Belgian Shepherds, do you have a favorite breed to judge?
yeah. Uh, I am a big fan of Great Danes.
All right.
Yeah, and so I would really enjoy judging Great Danes every time.
Is there a particular reason?
Well, there's a lot of photos of Cameron Diaz with Great Danes that I like a lot.
I was
Or,
wondering how long it would take for that to.
well, I could just see myself and Cameron and a Great Dane walking off into the sunset. It'll have to be walking off into the sunset because I just can't run, as I told you, from me injuries some years ago. No, I like. I've always loved Great Danes, and to be honest with you, like any breed that's well presented, well handled, of good temperament, I will enjoy judging. So obviously, I just like the easy options. I don't like the
Okay.
judge.
And is there a breed you dislike judging?
Um, Not particularly. What I dislike is I'm very much into interaction with the dogs. So I
Okay.
like to interact with the dogs. So one of the things I don't like, and I do have a little bit of an opinion about this, is I don't like some of the guarding breeds that we're not allowed to handle or that we shouldn't handle. And I do question whether really the show ring is the place for these breeds.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it spoils it. If you're going and you're having to be very careful all the time as to touching dogs, etc. And in my own breed, Belgian Shepherd, Malinois, I know from a lot of judges, talking to judges, they say, oh, the breed I worry about are Malinois because they're very quick and many of the working type are very sharp temperament-wise. some years ago, they invited me to judge the Belgian Shepherd Club show in Slovakia. And you don't mind me telling you stories, do you?
Fire ahead.
Anyway, I did this show in Slovakia, and there was one girl who could speak English with me. She met me at the airport, and she stayed with, well, almost all the time she stayed with me for the weekend. And she was in the ring stewarding for me, and she said, okay, is there any question you want to ask the exhibitors? And I was about to start Malinois. I said, okay, just two questions. I want to know, one, how old is the dog? And two, may I handle the dog?
Mm-hmm.
After the very first class, I just said to her, don't bother asking them anymore if I can handle the dog. Because every single one of them said, yes, you can handle the dog. And every single one of them went to eat me. And then if they couldn't eat me, they tried to eat the owner or handler. Then they tried to eat the dog beside them. So, it spoiled the appointment because the temperament. And then bizarrely afterwards, they had a barbecue for the members of the club and the exhibitors who were after having a tough time with their grading.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting at the top of the table with this lady who could speak English. And this guy sits beside me, and he had shown two Malinois females and had two very goods. They weren't the worst of what was there. So he in his pidgin English, he said, oh, you are Irish judge, I buy you beer. Now, unlike me to refuse a beer, so, oh, thank you very much. So he bought me a beer, and then a few minutes later, he goes, Irish judge, you're a great judge, I buy you a beer. So he buys me another beer. And then after a few minutes, he says, Irish judge, you're a great judge, I buy you shots. Now, at this stage, I'm beginning to think he's taking the pee out of me. So I said to the girl, I said, is he taking the, because if he is, I'll tell him what I really thought about his dogs. And then she explained to me, no, because in this country, which they should have explained beforehand,
yes,
to breed their bitches, they needed to have a very good grading at their specialty. And I had given this guy permission to breed his two Malinois bitches. So I didn't have the shots, but I would have taken a third beer if he had.
No, I think you raise a valid point because at the end of the day, it is a dog show, and a lot of these. And I remember we could go on for ages, but I remember an incident where Rita refused to, or a guy with a Czechoslovakian wolf dog in Italy said, "No, you can't touch the dog." I said, "Well, if I can't touch the dog, then you're very good." And he argued and argued. But if you can't put your hand on the dog, particularly coated breeds, and you cannot judge them. It's not a dog show.
Yeah, you take like the really serious headbanger breeds, as I call them, Fila Brasileiro.
Yes.
Okay. I judged them in Holland. I had two, I had a male and a female. And the same lady had the two dogs. Now, she was a very, very good handler. There was no way that I was going to get anywhere near putting my hands on these dogs. As soon as I approached, she had the dog and she was showing me the teeth. And so she showed her male, and the dog came in. He stood. She showed me the teeth. I didn't attempt to touch the dog because I knew this was, characteristic of the breed. I did have to check for testicles. And I gave him the very slightest ever touch. Okay. That wouldn't even make you or I flinch. Okay. So he had the very slightest touch to make sure he was entire. And he locked eyes on me. And he never took his eyes off me. And I gave him an even wider berth. And he moved up and down. And all the time he was moving, he was looking back. And anyway, he came back. He was a very nice specimen. And I gave him excellent. And the lady said to the steward, now I'm bringing in the female. He cannot touch the female at all. I didn't want to touch the male, but I just had to. But he cannot touch the female at all.
No. Is there a particular fault you dislike?
I would say that first of all, I dislike splayed feet.
Oh, okay. I have to think about that too.
Yeah, I dislike splayed feet. But really, I think the most important thing is any fault that is going to have an impact on that dog's life. And that's why I welcome the kennel clubs now introducing health measures and health checks and breed watch. I do think that's very good and very beneficial. So they would be the things that I would have the most concerns about.
Okay. And best dog you've ever judged?
Again, this is a very difficult question. You know, I would have judged some of the most spectacular Belgian Shepherds. And you know, I could look at a list of breeds and go, oh, I remember I did that. Oh, I remember that. You know, so you could be here forever saying, you know, there was one bulldog, bizarrely, in Finland that I judged back over 10 years ago, and he was a dog called Black Hope Brando, and I just thought he was absolutely spectacular. And when he came into the ring, he was just everything that, you know, I thought he should be, and he was stunning. And the funny thing about that was, Jean was judging at a ring beside me, and she just finished and literally was coming up, and I was finishing best of breed in bulldogs. I said, "Oh, you have to come in and see this dog. This dog is spectacular." Blah blah blah. And I waxed lyrical about this dog, and I finished it. We went for lunch, and I'm all the time over lunch saying, "Oh, this dog was absolutely amazing." And then we went and sat by the group rings. And in Finland, in those days, they used to bring you a newspaper, which was their local newspaper, you know, dog paper. And once you had finished judging your breeds, they gave you a copy of the paper. And I was disgusted because here was this dog on the front page. He was after winning their Dog of the Year or some big award. And now it looks like I just judged him because he was after, you know. But he was spectacular, and he actually came back. He came back and was shown in the UK, and became a UK champion, which is a fair achievement.
Yeah, absolutely.
And become a champion in the UK. And
is there a particular dog that you've seen or you've known that you would have loved to have gotten your hands on?
I would say two Great Danes that I loved from years back. One was a dog called Yakanto Top Gun.
Okay.
And one was a bitch called Drumview Trade Secret. And I just did two fawns, and I just thought, oh, they're just, you know. So bizarrely, I'm not saying Belgian Shepherd.
Yeah.
Or anything Dane handled by Cameron Diaz. Yeah.
No, there she goes again. You have to get over that fixation. What's your biggest judging achievement?
Biggest judging achievement. Okay, for an Irish judge, I think the pinnacle of your career has to be judging Best in Show at your Kennel Club show. And I had the honour of doing that in St. Patrick's Day 2019. And that was, for me, you know, proud Irish man, judging for the IKC, super. I also had the honour of judging at Crufts in 17 and 18, doing my own breed. So, as everyone knows, the Belgians are 4 varieties. So myself and Jean did two varieties each year, 17 and 18, and swapped. So that was a spectacular judging.
Okay.
Well, you know.
Okay. And here we go. This is where we're probably going to be here for about a half an hour now. So, your most embarrassing or funny moment?
It's going to take a while, all right. I had one funny moment when I was showing Belgian Shepherds, and this is going back many years ago on the circuit, and it was at a time when we used to have one green star for a breed. So dogs and bitches competing together. And this lady came who was a top judge, and I was showing a female who was maybe a little bit on the tall side. So in the open class, and it's open dog or bitch, she starts going over the bitch, and she goes over the head, and she goes down the top line, and then she checks under the tail, and I can see her face is kind of dropped, and then she has another feel under the tail. Okay, and then she comes back up to the head, and then she goes over the head again, and then she goes down the back, and then she goes under the tail again.
Okay.
And the expression isn't like kind of coming around to the way I wanted it. So, and the second time she went down over the dog, I'm there saying, "Good girl, Asa. Good girl. Good girl. Oh, you are the best girl. Oh, fantastic. Good girl." I must have said it 20 times, and she came back up and she whispered in my ear and she said, "Oh, excuse me, young man, young man, I can only find one test." So I just said, "Well," I said, "this is actually a bitch." "Oh, okay, up and back, please." And then I tried it. And I think regardless of what the dog had done that day, she was going to be best of breed, and she was duly best of breed, that was one. I did write down another one here because I knew you were going to ask me this question. So just bear with me. Yes. Okay.
Well, Johnny's written an essay.
Yeah. 2 stories. One is I was judging miniature pinchers in Estonia. And on the first day, it was a 2-day show. So all the breeds, both days. And on the first day, this beautiful miniature pincher came into the group. And I thought, oh, he's really smart. And I was doing them the next day. So, right enough, junior dog, in comes this dog. Oh, that's that dog. Okay. The lady puts him on the table. And he starts leaning into the owner. And I go over, I open his mouth, I go over his head, I go down over his back, check his entire, check angulations. He's leaning all the time like this, which is annoying. I come back around to the front and he's still leaning into the owner like this. So the owner has a little pouch on her belt. And I said, "You have a little piece of food for your dog?" "Oh, yes, yes, yes." And she goes reaching for the food. And my hand remains out waiting for the food to come. And the next thing, the miniature pincher just goes and locks onto my hand. So I quickly go, "Ooh." And the lady turns around and goes, "There you go." I said, "Thank you. You can leave the ring now, madam. Thank you very much." And that was your hands. And then I judged in Australia, and this story actually has come back to haunt me for many years. I judged a show called Sunbury, which is in Melbourne, and I think it's one of the biggest shows in Australia. And it happens on the same day as the Melbourne Cup, which is a big horse race. And they stopped the show to watch the race on big screens and everything else, and people drink champagne and whatever. And at lunchtime on the day, the secretary said to me, Colin Hamilton was his name, and he said, "Oh, Paul," he says, "we have this class that we run during lunch every year. It's called Fashion in the Field. And we wonder, would you judge it for us? Because, it's a bit of fun and we want you to kind of camp it up and everything else." No better man to camp it up. So I said, "Yeah, sure, yeah, no problem." And so some of the dogs were dressed up and some of the owners were dressed up, and they really put a lot of effort into this. And it was quite good fun. Everybody was around the ring, and it was a popular thing. And at one stage, this very attractive young lady was moving around the ring with a dog, and I asked her especially to go around a second time. And literally, just as I turned to look at the next dog, her top fell down. And the whole ring enjoyed this, and I totally missed it after making it time. And then they had this other guy who came in, and he had glasses of wine on a little. He was dressed like a wine waiter, and his little pug was dressed like a little wine waiter. Okay. And he had glasses of wine, so I had a glass of wine from him. So I'm now judging dogs with a glass of wine in my hand. And the next guy was Australia's version of Stephen Minogue. Right? He was as gay as Christmas, this poor lad. And he was wearing he had a black leather hat, black waistcoat, cut off t-shirt. I'm explaining him too well. Black leather hot pants. And he was showing a Staffordshire Bull Terrier. But he was showing this dog like on a long lead, and he was good crack, this guy.
Okay.
And there's a picture was taken at the very moment where I'm actually going down to check if the dog is entire, but I'm pretending that I'm checking to see if he's entire. And
Yeah,
this picture regularly appears on Facebook. They have a thing called
I've
Fashion
seen
Week.
it.
And it's a picture of me with a glass of wine in the hand going down, and lucky enough there's a few people laughing in the background. Otherwise, and people regularly tag me and go, "Oh my God, this is you!" But that was, I think, actually as well. That's a good point to make. Is that nowadays we must be so careful as judges because everything is being
Yes,
recorded. Everyone has a phone that's taking photographs and everything else, and
you're
things
quite
can be
right.
made to look like some. Now that was exactly what it was. I mean, that was
Yeah,
on, and yes, I did have a glass of wine in my hand, but
but you're right. Um, when you started showing first, when you started judging, who inspired you most?
I don't think that anybody really inspired me when I handled first, because I was just a kid, and I was going to shows, and maybe I was probably inspired by my brother that he showed dogs, and I wanted to emulate what he was doing with the dogs. Um, and I was kind of, there was no, well, there may have been junior handling, but I didn't go into junior handling because I was a shotgun handler.
You're too old.
So to be honest with you, it was one of these things. I don't think I thought about the question. I can't really think of anyone. Now I will say that regarding the judging, there's a number of people who have inspired me. Um, One was like I was fortunate enough to judge with Terry Thorne,
Okay.
and I couldn't believe how down to earth he was. There was no airs and graces about the man. Like I'm judging with him in Belgium, and I'm thinking this guy's a legend, you know. And I always remember when we parted after that weekend, and he said, "Oh, Paul, thanks very much, and thanks for your great company." And I'm going, "Terry Thorne saying this to me."
Mm.
You know? Liz Cartledge, I judged with Liz Cartledge. Myself and Jean judged with Liz Cartledge in Australia and New Zealand, and I think she's an amazing judge. I think
Mm.
she's spectacular.
I totally agree.
And like that again, we talked dogs with that lady, and no airs and graces, no the
Very
big
down
head,
to earth.
down to earth. So they would be two. I also was very good friends with Neil O'Sullivan. Neil O'Sullivan, and this is probably where my love of Great Danes come. Neil now lives in the USA, originally from Middleton in Cork, and he used to live in Rathfarnham when I lived in Tala. So I would go to Neil regularly, and we would look at pictures of Great Danes, and he would go back for years and years and years, showing me pictures of Great Danes, and I'd admire this dog, and he'd say, "Oh, this is the father, this is the grandpa," and it was just a spectacular learning curve to learn
Mm.
about the breeds and the information that I picked up from talking to Neil. He also used to show a Harlequin Great Dane at the time called Lucy, and she was a very lightly marked Harlequin, almost all white, just one little black patch. And it was very hard to get your eye in to appreciate her.
Mm.
But he taught me how to look past colour in Great Danes. That colour was just something, and
Mm.
you needed to get the outline. And I think that's something that has stuck with me because I will be very much into a heart. Again, this comes from the Belgian Shepherd. This harmonious outline that we look for, and you try and find it in all breeds, and a balance.
Mm.
That's a word that doesn't appear in many breed standards, but it's so important that we find balance in a breed. You know,
Absolutely.
and
I think you hit on a very interesting point there because I don't think up and coming judges do it enough these days. That these days it shows you go, you show your dog, you lose maybe, and you go home. Judges need to sit, watch, and listen.
yeah,
And ask questions. And I said this, and this has come up in various interviews that I've done with other judges. The most, you mentioned this cartridge, I judged away with her in Italy. And I was doing best in show, and she was doing a couple of groups. We sat at the groups, and I never met her before. The two of us just sat there, and we talked dogs, and it was fascinating. And no matter how long I'm judging, I will still love to sit with people at the side of a ring and discuss a breed. And I don't think people do it enough these days,
Yeah.
or ask questions.
Yeah.
People are not afraid of being asked questions. They will
No,
help.
I think that's one of the problems as well, is that maybe sometimes we feel afraid that we're going to be put on the spot. Maybe people feel that someone is going to say, "Well, you tell me about that dog's head," or "Tell me there what you see." It's not like that. I would have a great friend in Stephanie Walsh, and Stephanie and myself will go and look at pictures of dogs and talk dogs, and if we're away judging, we'll watch groups, and I just find that I can bounce stuff off Steph, and I'm not afraid to say, "Oh, I don't see something," and likewise, Stephanie with me say, "Oh, tell me, Paul, about that breed in group two." And it's great that you can bounce things off people like that. And we must remember as well and keep ourselves, level here. Like, yes, I'm an all breeds judge, but I have strengths. There's breeds that I'm strong in, and there's breeds that I'm not strong in. And
Well, absolutely, this is true of us all.
we are always learning. We are always learning.
Always. So again, when you're as an FCI all breeds judge, and when you go away, we're very often faced with a lot of dogs and a lot of breeds to judge, and you are faced with the inexperienced exhibitor, or the dog that maybe is not trained as well as you would perhaps like it. What's your approach with them?
Well, sometimes you're under a little bit of pressure depending on the number of dogs you have. But if you have the time to give, I just think that's so important, because we all started somewhere. We all had our first handling experience, which maybe didn't go so well, or our first year handling, where we were trying to learn. So I think it's nice to take a little bit of time and help that person, because this is the next generation coming through, and we have a sport which is, it needs all the help it can get. So I think it's important for us as judges, as exhibitors, to help new people coming in, to try and encourage them to stay, especially if there's young children involved, to keep them involved.
Yeah. I think also these people in a lot of countries have spent a lot of money for your opinion. And whilst you may have the handlers coming under you that are, I mean, if I'm judging, I would probably perhaps give handlers a little less time because the dogs are so well behaved, etc., rather than somebody who is much less experienced, or perhaps is only their first or second show. I would certainly give them a little more time.
And the thing about it is, majority of those people will take what you say on board.
Yes,
they really do. We judged in Spain earlier this year in February, and this man came in judging a dog, and God love him, he was at the same level of handling ability as me, okay, and he wasn't the very best. And I said to him afterwards, I said, your dogs are very good today, but I said, that's a really good quality dog, and if you can get a little bit more out of him, and there was plenty of time in Spain, very relaxed regime in Spain. So I was saying to him, just you have the lead, like he had the lead wrapped around his hand. I used to do the same thing years ago. I do actually sometimes today. And ended up the lead wrapped about 10 times around his hands. He was nearly losing blood circulation. And you give him a couple of tips, and bizarrely the next day he stopped me and he said, "Oh, I took your advice, and I get this very good handler to take this dog today, and she showed me, and we got best of breed." I go, good man.
Yeah. And when you're judging, you mentioned you've judged Crufts, etc. When you're judging in countries where standards may be slightly different, particularly countries like the US, what's your approach? How do you block out the FCI standard that's in your head and is right?
Yeah, you have to respect that country and their rules and regulations and the breed standards that they put down, and judge exactly to what they want you to judge. So it's a case of judging that standard in the run up to the show.
Do you think there's a case for maybe some of these breeds becoming independent?
How do you mean? Sorry.
For instance, the golden retriever, which is quite different in the United States or South America or other parts of the world that have a different standard almost.
You mean like creating almost a different breed?
Mm-hmm.
No,
They're very different.
Yeah, I know, but I wouldn't be in favor of that at all.
Mm.
You know,
Okay.
I think we already see a lot of breeds that are very, very similar. Group 6, Group 1, there are a number of breeds, and I don't think we should be going down that road at all.
Okay. Yeah.
Ideally, in an ideal world, I'd like to see the country of origin followed by everyone.
Mm. Yes. Yes. In an ideal world. So when you started judging, best piece of advice you were given?
A piece of advice I was given, oh no, a piece of advice I heard, I wasn't given, was Harry Jordan, who was a very famous in the UK. And I had judged a Three Counties show, and I'd gone in for my lunch, and he was actually holding fort in the center of the restaurant. And there must have been 10, 15 people sitting around. And I was eating my lunch, but I was listening to the questions they were asking. And one of the questions they said to him was, "So, Harry, you're in a ring and you don't know what to do. You don't know which dog to give it to. What do you do?" And he very smartly says, "Yeah, whatever you're going to do, you do it quickly. The sooner you do it, the sooner they forget." And I thought, that is, because, you know, as
And
an
it's so
exhibitor,
true.
there's nothing worse than watching that judge go up and back, up and back. And eventually you say, he doesn't know what to give.
Yeah.
You know? So that is definitely a good one. And I had a very good mentor as well called Vic Salt. Vic was very famous in rough collies and Belgian Shepherds. And we were fortunate enough to have a Belgian Shepherd from Vic some years ago. But when you would talk to Vic about judging, and he would explain what it's like when you see a special dog coming into the ring. And, you know, you feel the hair stand up, not on your head, obviously, not on my head. Feel the hair stand up in the back of your neck. And Vic had an expression, and it was, you know, something comes into the ring and fills me up. And it's so true. And I'd like to think that I always go into the ring looking for that dog that's going to fill me up. And if I ever went in and judged just as a job of work, I think that would be the day I'd have to stop, because you go in hoping you're going to see something spectacular. You're going to find a beautiful puppy. You're going to get your hands on something that's really special. And I think if you lose that, you know, years ago,
we'll always judge nice dogs in general, but maybe on the 8th or 9th time you'll find that one spectacular dog. That, as you say, it makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck.
Yeah, and when you're judging it, then you're afraid to touch it in case it's like a piece of crystal. You're afraid to touch it in case something goes wrong, you know. And
there's no better feeling.
And after judging it, you ask it to move, and you say, "Please don't be crippled." You know, go up and down that ring, and please don't be crippled. You know.
Yeah. And for aspiring judges, what advice would you give them?
I think we've kind of touched on it already. I would say to them, speak to everybody. Speak to everybody. Speak to breeders. Speak to judges. Don't be afraid to ask judges about their breed or about that breed. Some years ago, I was judging poodles for one of the first times, and I contacted Andrew Brace. And I said, "Andrew, could you give me some advice?" And he gave me a little 4 or 5 line piece. And I still have it, and I keep it every time. And it just captures the poodle in those little 4 or 5 lines. It's spectacular. And little things like that are, you know, everyone will help you. There's no one who'll say, "No, sod off, I'm not going to tell you." They'll all answer the questions. They'll all help. And I think
absolutely, Kenneth Ed, who I was a great admirer of in Sweden, sitting down over dinner with me discussing American cockers because he was fascinated by them. And because it was my breed, he said, I want to know. And, it doesn't matter what level you're at. Ask questions.
Yeah.
Learn.
I also think as well for aspiring judges, when you go into the ring, have that blueprint in your mind of what your ideal dog is, what you want, the dog that you admire most in a breed. And we talked there about Stephanie. We did some training with some judges, and like that again. One of the things I said to them was, if you're going to judge a number of breeds, get a photograph of a really, really good specimen and stick it on one side of a piece of board, and on the other side, write down the made breed points. And these students were just spectacular. They were fantastic, and they will make wonderful judges. But that's a really good tip. If you can get in your mind or have it with you when you're going to judge breeds, a photo of a dog that you believe, that for me is the blueprint of the breed. You will not go far wrong.
Yeah. And in this day and age of, it's not like when we were growing up in the 70s, but okay, you had football, but we didn't have PlayStation, we didn't have mobile phones, we didn't have laptops that we can access everything immediately. How do we encourage young people to
Colin,
don't worry
about not having laptops. Some of us didn't even have shoes. My mother used to paint my feet black. I do think it's one of the problems that we have with our hobby, because there are so many different attractions that are there for young people nowadays. Laptops, as you say, these gaming stations, everything else, and I think it's so important that we encourage the young coming through. One of the things that has come up at discussion within the IKC is having a young kennel club. And I think that would be very, very beneficial in our backyard here.
Yes.
That we bring the young people in at the very start and teach them how to run a club and let them give them their head. And one of the other things I always felt in relation to junior handlers was, I always thought it would be a far better education for juniors if they were to handle other breeds outside of the family breed. And I think that rather than having, here's a terrible handler going to try and bring juniors down to my level. But these juniors, some of them are fantastic. And they have dogs trained absolutely to perfection. And you could jump around the dog and the dog will not move. And they have the dog trained to perfection. And unfortunately, under our system, that's the one dog they show for the year. Unless they have more dogs in the family. I actually think that what they should do is they should say, okay, Colin Beattie, you won with an American Cocker Spaniel today. You cannot show an American Cocker for the rest of the year until the final. Maybe for the junior handling final, you can show an American Cocker, but you must go and find another breed. And like that again, I think that would be beneficial. So Colin Beattie comes to me and says, oh, will you show me how to handle a Belgian Shepherd? Or maybe you would have a Belgian Shepherd that I would handle. And I think it would be, first of all, a great way to get the kids meeting the other people, getting them learning about different breeds, getting an education about other breeds, know. And I'd like to see that change.
Yeah, it's very well worth exploring, actually. Yeah. Something along those lines. Yeah. And critiquing dogs, which obviously we don't do in this country, but we do probably 95% of the time when we judge abroad. How do you approach that, and do you see a value in it?
Oh, I think there's a huge value. Absolutely huge value. I'd love to see us doing it in Ireland. And even if it was only that we critiqued 1 and 2, that would be such a step up. I think it's beneficial from all sides. First of all, It's beneficial for the exhibitor, the breeder, for the new person coming into dogs to learn that, what exactly is a good dog,
Yeah.
and even for us as judges, when we go away and we judge other breeds, we also pick up and learn things that we can then apply to our own breed and to other breeds as we judge going forward. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of critiques. Yeah.
And what's your approach when you're doing them?
Start at the top, back to the tail.
Mm.
Just get into a set routine,
Yeah. I have to say, when I'm judging I think it does focus your mind when you are judging, and even when I'm judging in countries that don't have critiques, I find myself critiquing in my head, almost out loud sometimes.
Yeah. I think one of the things is we have a exhibitors in Ireland are almost expecting an excellent grading. They don't understand that a very good grading is actually a very high opinion of a dog.
Yes.
And so if you give a very good grading, it's almost like a slur on the family name, when in fact it could be just something very slight.
Absolutely.
Just on the day, didn't take that dog to the highest level, highest award. That's why I think that there's potentially huge benefit in Ireland if we were to introduce CK quality, because I think it's going to be very difficult for judges, the Irish judges in particular, to really adjust to our current system and start using the grading better. So the way around this is, look, if you want to give everything excellent, okay, but let's bring the CK in here. So you placed your dogs 1, 2, 3, 4. How many CKs are you giving? And it gets them thinking a little bit,
Do you think there's a danger though of them going, okay, they're all CK? There's a fundamental.
I mean,
we have a fundamental issue where we do need people to be. I'm not saying decimate breeds, because that in itself is wrong, but to be more honest with their grading.
Yeah, to be braver, maybe to be a little bit
braver.
More brave. Yeah. I do agree, but we've all heard the stories of the judge on the way to the ring saying to the steward that they're all going to be excellent today, and the judge hasn't seen any of them yet. That's scary.
That's as bad as giving out too many very goods or goods.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to just judge what you see.
Yes.
I'm don't get me wrong, I'm not the hardest grader in the world, although the Slovakian, Belgian, Czech people will tell you otherwise. But I'm actually not. I don't believe I'm a tough grader. I think I'm actually quite.
And for people who are who don't or haven't critiqued very often, how important is it to, if you are giving out a very good or a lower grade, how important is it to say why you are actually doing that?
Well, I think it's you have to justify your grade. There's nothing worse than giving someone a very good and they walk out of the ring, they have no idea why they got a very good. The easiest thing in the world is just to turn around and say, just 1 second, that was the reason why. Today this was the reason. It takes you a split second, and yet the exhibitor goes out and goes, okay, I still call you all the names under the sun on the way home in the car, but just take the time out, because we're trying to encourage people to stay in our sport. I would also worry as well that new exhibitors might get disillusioned with too many very goods or too many goods as they're starting off. That is also something that sticks in the back of my mind and go, because we all had dogs that,
absolutely,
not the May Wests, and we stuck at it because we were, family, and we were made to stick at it. I mean, I can remember one of my cockers, and he would have made a fantastic Springer. So like if he had been in the current system and being graded, I'd be well gone out of the sport.
And do you think these days that many judges understand the role they have in influencing the development of breeds?
I do. Well, I think many judges get stuck in their head with what is the disqualifying faults in this breed, as opposed to looking at a breed and going, what is the function of this breed?
Mm.
What was this breed bred for? What am I to expect temperament-wise? You know, and that's one of the problems I see. And the other issue I would have as well is breeders who, there's certain breeds where they always want a breed specialist.
Yes.
And Belgian Shepherds, we put our hands up immediately and say Belgian Shepherd is a head breed. It's a head breed. Everything, a lot is in the head.
Mm.
So if we don't get a good balance of judges,
Mm.
if we only had breed specialists who all focus on that one breed point, then we start to lose our way. And that's why I think it's good for outside judges, all round judges, to come in and to say, "I've got to put up that dog because he moves really well."
Yeah.
Opposed to the heads look similar. I like the movement on that one. So non-specialist people still have a value to give to you in your breed.
I think they have a huge value because they will. Yeah, and they say, okay, you've got beautiful heads, but you're starting to lose movement, or you're starting to lose top lines, or whatever, And I think it's so important. And in a country where it's rare for us to get a breed specialist, actually, I actually find that sometimes more valuable to have the opposite. You have a breed specialist come in the odd time and say, okay, you've got lovely movement, etc., but you're losing, where the heads, where the top lines.
Yeah.
Now, as somebody, you're very involved in the sport of dogs, and as somebody who's put himself, you're a secretary, you're a club secretary, you're a show secretary, you're involved with the IKC committees, etc., and we're not going down the political road whatsoever, but do you think enough people put enough back into our sport these days?
I think there's a lot of people who put a lot back into the sport.
Yes.
And I think rightly so. And I think it's important for me to put back into the sport because, we've talked over the last while here about judging abroad, and I've over 40 years enjoyment from this. So why wouldn't I give back? I've had the honor of going away and representing Ireland and judging and whatever. So why wouldn't I give back to something that's been good to me?
Mm.
So absolutely, I enjoy the organisation side of things as well. So that's okay with me. I think sometimes people are a little bit afraid to put their head up to say, what? Even thinking about it now, how do you approach a club and say, "Can I help?" A lot of clubs invite people on to help, but if no one ever invited you, how would you actually go and do that yourself?
Yeah.
That's where I think the Young Kennel Club has a lot of benefits, because we're starting these people young and we're getting them into the admin side of things and the organisation side of things, and that would be very beneficial. But I think if you're just someone who's moseying along and showing it, you say, "Yeah, I wouldn't mind helping a show." Do they have the neck to go and say, "Hi, Paul, can I help with Navan show?" They probably don't. And yet I would be screaming out for help. As all shows are, we're all looking for help.
Yeah.
I would love, in a way, if we as a kennel club could try and mirror what the GAA have done. So where you have a community, like in the GAA, you're a community, then you're county, then you're national. And if we could have that in the IKC, where you're part of a club, then you're part of a county club, and then you're part of the national kennel club.
Okay, we're heading down a political road now here, which I don't really want to head down. But I do think that a lot of shows, and you run shows. I mean, perhaps you don't, but a lot of Albury Championship shows will struggle to get people to steward, and there are a lot of people that aren't necessarily going to be at the show that are showing. It just, I wonder if people.
I often
I think
wonder.
if people said, I actually think if people said, look, can I give you a dig out? Most show societies would say, yeah,
Oh, take their arm and all.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because we are struggling. And I mean, there is an aging committee scenario happening right now.
Yeah.
And even, but anyway.
Maybe, perhaps it's something that could be explored. If you think when the new education criteria came in, one of the items on the criteria was stewarding.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, we got this influx of people who had to steward to meet a requirement before they could go on and judge. And we got this influx of stewards. Now, likewise, if we could in some way put into an education criteria that you had to be involved in a club as part of your criteria. You had to be involved in the organization or the running of a club in some way as a committee member or something,
Yes, without making it mandatory, because then we're just bringing in a whole load of rules to and make people do it rather than want to do it. And it's the people who want to do it that we need to encourage, because you and I and the Rita McCarthy Beaches of this world are not going to be around forever.
That's a very glum note to hit. What?
There you go. So, as a very popular judge and exhibitor, how are you coping with no dog shows? Are you enjoying it? Are you enjoying the break?
The break is enjoyable, except that I've gone out and kind of resurrected 25
Football?
years. No. I felt a pain in my knee when you said that. I resurrected the garden.
Okay.
25 years of neglect. And we found a few dead bodies, and so we know where the skeletons are. But yes, you do miss them. We all kind of say, "Oh no, I don't miss the shows." I would worry about how many people are going to go back. I would have a fear about that. I would fear that people would realize, "Wow, look, where's all this money come from?" Oh yes, I haven't been entering shows.
It is amazing.
Yeah, they realize that there's something else out there.
But
I organized a couple of, I helped organize a couple of online shows and virtual talk shows, and I was asked to judge a couple, and I actually think that it was. I know some people have a little bit of a hang up and say, "Oh, how do you judge?" We all work from photographs. We all read books and learn. And when the person who enters the dog in a virtual dog show knows that we are judging the photograph. That's all we're judging. We're judging the photograph. We're accepting that they can come out, and we're accepting that they can make it to the end of the ring. I think that would actually be a very, very good educational tool for up and coming judges. I know one of the things we always talked about was mentoring, and I just think that we're a little bit small in this country, mentoring wise, because if I mentor you in Belgian Shepherds and then you come up to judge Belgian Shepherds and I'm showing under you, sure, he's got to give it to Paul. Wasn't he mentored? So that's always going to be an issue. But if you actually, if we look at photographs of a Belgian Shepherd and I say to you, this one is particularly nice because of that, and we don't know who the owner is. You know what I mean? It's they're photographs from Russia or wherever, Scandinavia.
But isn't that the value of the breed seminar?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But I mean, in this day and age, I think now is, I think we could have still make use of virtual dog shows.
Absolutely. Well, it has been extraordinarily enjoyable. I do have one final question for you, by the way. This is the random one.
Oh, okay.
So you're in a room, an empty room, okay?
Oh, I've seen this.
And there's two doors.
Sorry, go on.
Okay, 2 doors. One door leads you to Best in Show Crufts 2021. And the second door is a weekend with Cameron Diaz. Which door do you walk through?
I was never really pushed about winning Best in Show at Crufts. It was, I'm going to tell a story now. I imagine we're probably past the watershed, so I can tell this story. Years ago, I had a German SV judge came and judged German Shepherds at one of my shows, and he was a lovely, lovely guy, and a younger guy. So after the show, and we'd had dinner and a few drinks, and of course I would always slag German Shepherd judges and people, because really a German Shepherd is just a poor man's Belgian Shepherd. But I always have the German Shepherd, the SV judges in particular, they're all so teat orientated. So I said to this guy, I said, a little bit like your question there. I said, Hans, I'm going to put you out in the field in the middle of nowhere. And I said, this absolutely stunning dog is going to come into the ring, this German Shepherd. Absolutely amazing. He just glides around the ring. And he walks immediately into position. Handler doesn't have to touch him. And he has the most beautiful outline. Super bone, rich tan, lovely dark eye, excellent shape ears, wonderful temperament, fantastic rib cage, angulations, wonderful front and rear. And I said, you open his mouth and there's one tooth missing. And then we bring a second dog into the ring. And the second dog runs around the ring, and he might be slightly lame on his front end. And you can't touch him because his temperament is shot. And he's slightly light eyes, and his ears aren't perfect. Also, his bone is a little bit weak, and his feet could be a little tighter. And he's a little bit narrow through the body, but he has all his teeth. I said, which one do you put up first? And as an SV judge, he said, I put up the one with all the teeth. I said, okay, now I'm going to take you to a nightclub. And I said, in the corner is Cameron Diaz, and she's wearing a very, very short skirt, looking absolutely stunning. And Cameron is missing one tooth. In the other corner is my grandmother, and she is looking a little bit worse for wear. And she has all her teeth. I said, who do you want to take back to your hotel room? Okay, Cameron Diaz. So I did get the message through to that SV judge.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah,
well,
on
that note, Paul, thank you very much. It's been thoroughly enjoyable, really funny, really interesting. We got a lot of positive comments coming through. So, good night and thank you.
Thanks, Colin.
Pablo.